underscoring the urgency of strengthening fiscal and external buffers and maintaining policy credibility. The macro-fiscal environment remains challenging, with declining mineral revenues, rising expenditure pressures, and growing requirements for social and economic support, and all of these placing strain on the fiscal position. Government remains committed to a coordinated fiscal consolidation strategy aimed at restoring fiscal sustainability, rebuilding fiscal buffers, and safeguarding macroeconomic stability. Key consolidation measures include expenditure prioritization, enhancing the efficiency of public spending, strengthening domestic revenue mobilization, and advancing SOE reforms. These efforts, Mr. Speaker, will be implemented in a balanced and growth-supportive manner, ensuring the protection of essential social spending and the safeguarding of critical investments that drive economic transformation. Mr. Speaker, I wish to say a little bit about risks to the macro fiscal outlook. Mr. Speaker, the medium-term outlook is subject to significant macro-fiscal risks. Externally, slower global growth, continued weaknesses in the diamond market, volatile commodity prices, heightened geopolitical tensions, and climate-related shocks could prolong the recovery. It could also widen both fiscal and current account deficits and undermine efforts to build fiscal and external buffers. Domestically, risks to growth remain skewed to the downside, with economic growth likely to stay below potential if diamond market does not recover. Mr. Speaker, while the non-diamond sector may continue to cushion the economy from a deeper contraction, its stabilizing effect is inherently limited. In addition, delays in containing the foot-and-mouth disease outbreak could result in severe production losses, higher livestock mortality, adversely affecting smallholder farmers, reducing beef export receipts, and posing risks to national food security. A slower than anticipated implementation of BTEP would further hinder progress on economic diversification and the transformation agenda. Mr. Speaker, on the fiscal front, revenue risks are mounting as mineral earnings are projected to remain well below long-term averages, with only modest upside from potential price adjustments. Mr. Speaker, this persistent shortfall is widening fiscal gaps and is intensifying financial pressures. Expenditure risks also remain elevated as both recurrent and capital spending continue to outpace revenue growth. Without a credible fiscal consolidation or structural deficits are likely to persist, increasing reliance on borrowing. And consequently, debt vulnerabilities are becoming more pronounced, with rising financial needs are placing public debt on a steeper trajectory. Although debt levels remain within statutory limits, sustained fiscal slippage would undermine debt sustainability and heighten the economy's exposure to future shocks. Other risks to the outlook include rising inflation pressures, climate-related disruptions, SOE fiscal risks, and vulnerabilities arising from weak implementation of P projects, cybersecurity threats, and shocks to food and energy prices. Mr. Speaker, all these could further weaken growth prospects and strain fiscal and external balances. Mr. Speaker, to mitigate these risks, government will, among others, strengthen fiscal risk management, enhance policy coordination, and accelerate economic diversification and private sector-led growth to support a more resilient, diversified, and sustainable economy. Mr. Speaker, advancing diversification, deepening private sector participation, and boosting productivity remain central to mitigating emerging risks and securing long-term fiscal and economic sustainability. Sustained medium-term growth will require accelerated implementation, economy-wide reforms across key sectors, given their potentially catalytic impact on productivity and competitiveness. In addition, expenditure measures aimed at containing the public wage bill, simplifying and better targeting social benefits, and improving the governance and operational efficiency of SOEs are warranted to deepen fiscal discipline and strengthen the overall macro-fiscal framework, as well as a better cost-effective execution of large government infrastructure projects. Mr. Speaker, let me say a little bit about our fiscal strategy. Mr. Speaker, the 2026-2027 fiscal strategy places fiscal consolidation, discipline, and the building of buffers at the center of our policy approach. We will broaden our revenue base, enhance compliance, and improve the efficiency of our tax administration, while ensuring that public spending is firmly aligned with national priorities, anchored on value for money, accountability, and results. Together, these reforms will strengthen debt sustainability, restore fiscal resilience, and advance economic transformation in a manner that is both inclusive and sustainable. Mr. Speaker, I wish to say a little bit about strengthening domestic revenue mobilization. Mr. Speaker, every nation, and I mean every nation, needs adequate revenue to provide services effectively, and everyone has a responsibility to contribute their fair share. Taxation is not a form of punishment, Mr. Speaker. Taxation is not a form of punishment, Mr. Speaker. The Right Honorable Mr. Speaker. It is a collective investment in our shared development. It is about improving revenue performance, and it is not simply improving our revenue performance is not simply about raising tax rates. It is primarily about deploying smarter systems and building the institutional capacity required for effective revenue mobilization. Government remains committed to maintaining relatively low tax rates, but will act pragmatically when circumstances demand. In this context, a well-designed tax policy becomes fundamental to sustaining a healthy and competitive economy. In Botswana, the need for a comprehensive tax reform has never been more urgent. According to the 2025 OECD report, Botswana's tax to GDP ratio declined by 0.4% from 13.8% in 2022 to 13.4% in 2023, remaining below the African average of 16.1% and significantly lower than the SACU average of 20.5%. Mr. Speaker, these comparatively low levels of domestic revenue mobilization highlight the necessity of modernizing our core tax systems to improve efficiency, address under-taxed activities, improve revenue collection efficiency, strengthen compliance, and broaden our tax base. International experience further demonstrates what is achievable. For example, in Morocco has realized substantial gains in its tax to GDP ratio, reaching 28.5% in 2023 through sustained reforms aimed at strengthening tax administration and compliance, broadening the tax base, rationalizing tax exemptions, and digitizing tax declarations. Mr. Speaker, Botswana has already embarked on a similar reform trajectory. The Value-Added Tax Act of 2025 represents a major step in enhancing revenue mobilization and modernizing the tax framework. The Act introduces VAT on remote services and mandates electronic invoicing, thereby aligning Botswana with international best practice. Implementation is progressing well, supported by extensive stakeholder consultations and ongoing system upgrades to facilitate the registration and compliance of remote service providers. The rollout of electronic invoicing, which is anticipated in April 2026, will enable real-time transaction monitoring. It will strengthen compliance, it will reduce leakages, and significantly enhance revenue assurance as part of the broader digital transformation of our tax administration. Mr. Speaker, furthermore, the government is advancing a comprehensive, multi-year legislative and operational reform agenda. During this February sitting of Parliament, 4 key pieces of legislation will be presented to this hallowed house, namely the Value-Added Tax Bill 2025, the Income Tax Bill 2025, the Customs Amendment Bill 2025, and the New Tax Administration Bill 2025. This holistic review seeks to modernize and harmonize the tax framework. It seeks to simplify procedural and administrative provisions and ensure full alignment with the New Tax Administration Act. Mr. Speaker, in the 2025 budget speech, government proposed a 1.5% increase in corporate income tax and in the last bracket of the personal income tax. Following this announcement, we received extensive feedback from stakeholders, particularly regarding the definition and perceived fairness of the top earner threshold. Government took this feedback seriously and therefore paused implementation of the measures to allow for deeper reflection, refinement, and further consultation. As a result, the revised top earner threshold is now proposed at 400,000 pula and above per annum, which will attract Mr. Speaker, the Right Honourable Speaker, an additional 2.5% tax. Additional proposals include increasing the corporate income tax rate by 3% and reducing the zero-rated list to raise the effective VAT rate. Detailed provisions of each bill will be elaborated during the forthcoming parliamentary debates, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we remain firmly committed to deepening and broadening consultation. As part of this effort, government will convene a tax bizo, bringing together business, labor, civil society, technical experts, and the general public to deliberately gather practical insights, lived experiences, and technical perspectives that may extend beyond what is immediately visible to us as policy makers. This inclusive engagement, Mr. Speaker, will support the design of a more effective, growth-friendly tax laws and operational infrastructure that minimize economic distortions, strengthen efficiency, and build public confidence. Mr. Speaker, I wish to say a little bit about public expenditure efficiency. Mr. Speaker, closing efficiency gaps can raise long-term output in emerging and developing economies by up to 7.5%, while countries that act decisively on these reforms typically secure 30 to 40% more value for money through stronger public expenditure management. The solution is not a blanket spending cut. International experience shows that an across-the-board reductions can disrupt essential services, they can undermine efficiency, and they can indeed choke economic growth. Instead, building on reforms reaffirmed in the 2025 midterm budget review, government will pursue a more strategic and targeted approach, one that identifies and eliminates inefficiencies, one that reallocates resources where conditions allow and ensures that every pula delivers measurable economic and social returns. To support this shift, service delivery will be strengthened through expanded use of digital tools and that streamline public finance operations, enhance cash management practices, and modernize procurement systems. Mr. Speaker, combating corruption remains fundamental to improving spending efficiency. These efforts will be anchored in a strengthened medium-term fiscal framework that supports a credible fiscal consolidation path. In addition, Mr. Speaker, MDAs and local authorities will be required to align their financial practices with enhanced oversight and control frameworks. This includes strict compliance with financial regulations, transparent and competitive procurement practices, prudent management of public resources, and robust internal controls. Mr. Speaker, I wish to say a little bit about public finance management reforms. Mr. Speaker, I wish to share with you the progress on key areas of accounting and reporting: public procurement, public investment management, and national budgeting. National budgeting, which I highlighted in my previous speech. Mr. Speaker, while progress has been slower than anticipated, we are focused on completing the transition from cash to accrual accounting. The adoption of full accrual accounting will enable the preparation of government's first balance sheet, strengthening fiscal transparency, improving asset and liability management, and positioning Botswana to mobilize financing more efficiently in support of sustainable economic growth. As I've already indicated, Mr. Speaker, the rollout of a national e-procurement system represents a major step forward. The system will standardize and digitize procurement processes across central government, local authorities, and SOEs, reducing cycle times and improving competition and compliance. Mr. Speaker, over the years, while the country has invested significantly in infrastructure and development projects, gaps remain in how public investments are planned, how they are appraised, how they are implemented, and how they are monitored. Weaknesses in project selection, weaknesses in delays in execution, weaknesses in cost overruns have limited the overall impact of public spending on growth and service delivery. Waste as a result of these deficiencies is not only significant, it is immense. We will therefore leverage on the public investment management reform to improve the appraisal, the selection, and the execution of capital projects through rigorous cost-benefit analysis. Further to this, Mr. Speaker, we have also begun the mid-year spending reviews, now integrated into the budget process, to identify spending inefficiencies, assess the effectiveness of public programs, and guide informed budget reallocation decisions. Mr. Speaker, I now wish to start talking about budget performance. 2024-25 financial year budget outturn, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there has not been much change in the 2024-2025 financial year budget outturn since I delivered the 2025 mid-year budget review statement. Preliminary estimates indicate that 2024-2025 financial year point to a lower fiscal deficit of 19.01 billion, which is 7.25% of GDP, compared to a projected deficit of 24.73 billion, or 9% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, total revenues and grants for 2024-2025 financial year amounted to 69.61 billion pula, compared to 68.69 billion pula in the revised budget. Total expenditure and net lending is estimated at 88.62 billion pula, which is lower than the revised budget of 93.42 billion pula, due to cost-saving interventions implemented during the year. Mr. Speaker, 2025-2026 financial year revised budget estimates. Mr. Speaker, since the mid-year budget review, updated information indicates that the fiscal position for the 2025-2026 financial year is broadly expected to remain unchanged, with the deficit estimated at 25.48 billion pula. Total revenue and grants have been revised downwards to 71.22 billion pula from 75.49 billion pula in the original budget. The revision primarily reflects a decline in mineral revenue, which has decreased from 15.75 billion pula to 12.06 billion pula. Mr. Speaker, SACU revenue has been revised upwards by 631.1 million pula from 24.36 billion in the original budget to 24.99 billion, while VAT revenue has increased by 1.62 billion from 12.1 billion to 13.71 billion. Non-mineral income tax, Mr. Speaker, has been revised downward by 2.69 billion pula from 19.01 billion in the original budget to 16.32 billion. Profits from Bank of Botswana, if any, will be communicated at the appropriate time. Should such profits materialize, they would provide an important additional revenue stream, helping to ease fiscal pressures and narrow the fiscal deficit. Mr. Speaker, total expenditure and net lending have been revised downwards to 96.7 billion pula from the original budget of 97.61 billion pula. Of this amount, Mr. Speaker, recurrent expenditure estimates are maintained at their original budget levels, while development expenditure estimates have been revised downward by 903.32 million to 22.85 billion pula. Mr. Speaker, I wish to say a little bit about 2026-2027 financial year budget proposals. Mr. Speaker, I will now present the second budget proposals for the 13th Parliament, that is, the 2026-2027 financial year budget proposals. Total revenue and grants. Mr. Speaker, total revenue and grants for the financial year 2026-2027 are projected at 77.22 billion pula. SACU receipts are expected to remain the largest revenue source at 26.79 billion pula, followed by non-mineral revenue income tax, which is forecast at 19.76 billion pula. VAT collections are expected to be third largest contributor at 15.10 billion pula. Mineral revenue is projected to broadly remain the same at 12.21 billion pula. The remaining 3.36 billion pula is expected to come from other revenues and grants. Total expenditure and net lending. Mr. Speaker, the total expenditure and net lending is projected at a 103.58 billion pula for the financial year 2026-2027. Of this amount, total recurrent expenditure is expected to reach 80.32 billion pula, reflecting the government's ongoing commitment to operations and service delivery. Development expenditure is estimated at 23.38 billion pula, while net lending is minus 121.92 million pula. Statutory expenditure. Mr. Speaker, total statutory expenditure for financial year 2026-2027 is estimated at 27.26 billion pula, representing a 20% increase from the revised allocation of 22.70 in the 2025-2026 financial year. This provision covers government statutory obligations, including public debt servicing, pension contribution for civil servants, and other statutory commitments. The allocation towards pensions, gratuities, and compensations is primarily driven by the recalculated transfer of 5 billion pula for members of the Botswana Defence Force, an amount of 673.6 million pula required to rectify transactions related to government's capital injection into DBS, an obligation initially settled directly through the Bank of Botswana in 2019, as well as the anticipated contribution arrears of 5 million pula for C-band employees arising from a Court of Appeal judgment on multiple grading of the positions. Mr. Speaker, ministerial recurrent expenditure. Mr. Speaker, the proposed ministerial recurrent expenditure for the financial year 2026-2027 amounts to 67.78 billion pula, representing an increase of 1.8 billion pula or 2.8% over the approved budget of 65.95 billion pula for the 2025-2026 financial year. The growth is primarily driven by additional budgetary provision, including 802.82 million for tuition fees for new and continuing students, as well as the re-sponsorships, 560.62 million for salary incremental creep, and 542 million pula to accommodate housing and upkeep allowances for public service employees at the level of A3 to D1 in line with the collective labor agreement between the government and the unions. Further allocations include 337.17 million pula for the termination allowances and 154.89 million pula for staff costs for temporary teachers. The establishment of key national initiatives, namely the National Health Insurance at 77.81 million pula and 35.7 million pula for the Mineral Exploration Company. Furthermore, 57.47 million has been allocated to address funding shortfalls in the Department of Correctional Services, while 15.85 million has been provided for absorption of special constables. Mr. Speaker, the largest share of the proposed ministerial recurrent budget is allocated to the Ministry of State President, Defense and Security. This represents 13.05 billion, an increase of 502.77 million, or 4.01% over this year's approved budget. The allocation largely covers operational requirements of the BDF and the Botswana Police Service, reflecting government's continued commitment to safeguarding national security. The proposed budget will also finance the absorption of special constables into regular constable cadre, as well as procurement of their uniforms. In addition, Mr. Speaker, provisions have been made for the termination allowances, service charges, and static plant under the Directorate of Corruption and Economic Crime. The National AIDS and Health Promotion Agency, NAPA, has been transferred back to the Ministry of Health following the rescission of the earlier decision to transfer it to the ministry from State President, Defense and Security. Mr. Speaker, the second largest share of the proposed ministerial recurrent budget is allocated to the Ministry of Local Government and Traditional Affairs, amounting to 12.99 billion pula. This represents an increase of 1.7 billion pula, or 15.2%, compared to the allocation for the previous financial budget. The substantial allocation underscores government's commitment to strengthening social development and enhancing service delivery within local government structures and traditional affairs. The allocation is intended to improve the ministry's operational capacity, ensuring effective functionality and sustained provisions of essential services to communities across the breadth of Botswana. The significant growth is primarily attributable to the transfer of funding from the Ministry of Health to support the primary health care function, which was reassigned to the Ministry of Local Government and Traditional Affairs as part of the 2024 rationalization of ministerial portfolios. Mr. Speaker, further, a substantial portion of the budget is also allocated to the social welfare programs, which continue to experience significant growth. These include the Destitute Allowances, Old Age Pension Scheme, Orphan Care Program, and the newly introduced Sanitary Wear Support Initiative for Mothers and Babies, scheduled for rollout in the budget year. Mr. Speaker, to safeguard the integrity of these programs and ensure that resources reach the most deserving beneficiaries, it is recommended that the ministry should conduct a proxy means testing within the social protection framework. This will improve the identification of eligible recipients and minimize instances of double dipping. The Revenue Support Grant, RSG, will likewise continue to receive increased subvention in response to rising demands. However, Mr. Speaker, to mitigate escalating pressures on the RSG, local authorities are urged to expedite the review of valuation of properties in districts such as Gamalete and Palape. Mr. Speaker, the third largest share of the proposed budget is allocated to the Ministry of Child Welfare and Basic Education, amounting to 11.83 billion. This is an increase of 147.85 million, or 1.3%, over the current year's approved budget. The proposed allocation will cover teachers' salaries and allowances, the development and implementation of child welfare policies and programs, the payment of service charges in schools, and the operationalization costs of SOEs under the ministry. It also provides for temporary teaching staff necessitated by the expansion of schools. The ministry is encouraged to consider absorbing the temporary teachers to ensure continuity and stability in the affected schools. The budget will also cater for service charges for the Department of Secondary Education, as well as funding to the pilot project Bula Buka. This initiative, undertaken jointly with the Botswana Open University College and Open Schooling and the Youth Empowerment Education Trust aims to expand educational access, provide skills training, build character among out-of-school junior certificate leavers, and offer remediation opportunities to Botswana General Certificate of Secondary Education leavers. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Health has been allocated the fourth largest share of the proposed budget, amounting to 7.51 billion pula, representing 16.4% decline over the current year's approved budget. The decline in the ministry's budget is mainly attributed to the transfer of personnel-related funds to the Ministry of Local Government and Traditional Affairs following the reassignment of the primary health care function during the 2024 rationalization of ministerial portfolios. Mr. Speaker, the proposed budget will cover essential health sector requirements, including procurement of drugs, vaccines, laboratory supplies, equipment, as well as medical and surgical equipment. It will also cover public officers' medical aid scheme and fees for medical specialists. The proposed budget further includes funding for NAPA and provision for the establishment of the National Health Insurance. Mr. Speaker, the fifth largest share of the proposed budget is allocated to the Ministry of Higher Education, with a total of 7.37 billion pula, representing an increase of 2.7 billion pula, or 58% over the current year's budget allocation. The bulk of the budget covers tuition fees, now transferred from the Ministry of Finance, alongside student allowances and operational costs for SOEs under this ministry. The significant growth in the allocation is primarily due to increased provisions for tuition fees to accommodate the rising number of new tertiary students. The budget also includes funding transferred from the Ministry of Child Welfare and Basic Education to support the running costs of services relocated during ministerial restructuring. A key issue for consideration is the administration of the tuition fees vote, which was temporarily assigned to the Ministry of Finance in the 2022-23 financial year as a spending containment measure. The Ministry of Higher Education has now confirmed its readiness to resume management of this vote, hence the proposal to transfer back to the ministry. The ministry has also highlighted persistent challenges in the recovery of tertiary education student loans, particularly due to difficulties in accessing employment data for graduates, especially those in the private sector. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Lands and Agriculture has been allocated the sixth largest share of the proposed budget, amounting to 2.41 billion pula, representing a decline of 28.34 million, or 1.2%, compared to the current year's approved budget. The reduction is primarily due to scaling down of subventions to SOEs under the ministry. Despite the modest decline, the proposed budget remains strategically aligned to national priorities aimed at enhancing food security through support for agricultural production, through support for promoting self-reliance by empowering farmers, strengthening extension services, and investing in climate-resilient farming practices. The allocation further supports initiatives to expand employment opportunities across agricultural value chain. In addition, the proposed budget provides the continued formulation, implementation, monitoring, and management of land policies to ensure equitable access to land, enhance productivity, and promote sustainable land use. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure has been allocated the 7th largest share of the proposed budget, amounting to 1.93 billion pula. It represents a decrease of 7.98 million, or 0.4%, compared to the current year's approved budget. The bulk of the allocation, Mr. Speaker, will cater for the procurement of fuel, oil, and lubricants required to operate the entire central government vehicle fleet. The budget also provides for subscriptions to International Maritime Organization and subvention to SOEs, with Civil Aviation Authority receiving the largest share of the ministry's envelope. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Trade and Entrepreneurship is allocated the 8th largest share of proposed ministerial recurrent budget, amounting to 1.2 billion pula. This represents an increase of 30.35 million pula, or 3% increase over the current year's budget. The proposed budget mainly covers operational costs for SOEs under the ministry. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Finance has been allocated the ninth largest share of proposed budget, with an allocation amounting, Mr. Speaker, to only 1.14 billion pula. This reflects a significant decline of 1.92 billion pula, or 62.68% compared to the current year's approved budget, largely due to the transfer of tuition fees vote back to the Ministry of Higher Education. The major cost drivers within the recommended budget include transfers to SOEs and maintenance obligations. The proposed budget also provides for the establishment of a National Coordination Office to strengthen national efforts in combating anti-money laundering and counter-financing of terrorism in alignment with international standards. This office will play a key role, Mr. Speaker, in facilitating Botswana's participation in the 3rd round of mutual evaluation scheduled for 2027. Mr. Speaker, the allocation also includes provisions for the establishment of the Banking Tribunal in accordance with the new Banking Act and its accompanying regulations, which came into effect in August 2025. Mr. Speaker, the remaining share of the ministerial recurrent budget allocation, meaning the others, is a budget allocation of 8.12 billion pula, or 12%, has been recommended to be shared among other ministries and extra-ministerial departments. The development budget, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the proposed development budget expenditure for the financial year 2026-2027 amounts to 23.38 billion pula, which is 0.37 billion, or 1.5% lower than the approved budget of 23.75 billion pula for the 2025-2026 financial year. The development budget continues to prioritize the maintenance and consolidation of existing infrastructure, with emphasis placed on projects that offer high return on investment. Mr. Speaker, the largest share of the proposed ministerial development budget, amounting to 5.23 billion pula, or 22.36% of the total budget, is recommended for the Ministry of Minerals and Energy. The provision is intended to cover several critical allocations, including 2.27 billion for BPC power imports, 730 million to meet the loan obligation to the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, 200 million for the cross-border electricity supply project, and 100 million for the power distribution network reinforcement. These allocations, Mr. Speaker, reflect the Ministry's strategic focus on stabilizing electricity supply, honoring national commitments linked to Murupule B power plant, and strengthening the resilience of the national grid, and amid rising demand of regional supply constraints. Mr. Speaker, among the major projects of 2026-2027 is the Northwest Transmission Grid Phase 2, budgeted at 1.37 billion pula. This strategic transmission backbone will connect the Chobe district, enable electricity export into Zizabona market. The ministry also prioritizes rural village electrification and network extension aimed at expanding access to electricity in underserved communities, as well as the integrated resource plan, which targets achieving 50% renewable energy contribution by 2030. Mr. Speaker, in addition to safeguard the security of petroleum product supply, which is critical for sustaining economic growth and national stability, the government is implementing two projects, namely the expansion of the Francistown and Hansi petroleum depots, both scheduled for commissioning in April and August 2026, respectively. Mr. Speaker, the second largest share of the proposed development budget, amounting to 3.86 billion pula, or 16.52%, is proposed to be allocated to the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure. This allocation supports government's commitment of transforming Botswana into a regional transport hub by improving the national roads network and advancing the development of strategic alternative railway lines, including the Mamabula-Lephalale railway line and the Musetsi-Kazungula-Livingston line as part of SADC's strategic plan of the North-South corridor. Mr. Speaker, a total of 3.02 billion pula is earmarked for the following ongoing roads projects: output and performance-based roads contract, monitoring consultancy, the traffic signal modernization and centralized traffic control for Greater Gaborone, Botswana Integrated Transport Project, Mangkhodi Jwaneng, Rakuna Mabula, including Good Hope, Khoro Khatani Road, revision of Botswana Road Design Manual, Mandunyane Matangwane Road, Motopi Makalamabedi Road, New Tsadi Junction to New Tsadi Road, Radisele patch, Tamaga Kubung, Mushopa Manyana, Mokolodi Access Road, Digawana Molapabujang, Komukasitwa, Mahotlanin Tlantle Road, Burobadilepe, Hebron, Mukatako with access road to Lahagani, Pihetswani and Malete, Kadai access road, Mabule, Sukutlani Road, Muhembo Bridge, Charles Hill, Nojani, Maung, Nata Maung reconstruction, Nata Gueta section reconstruction, Francistown Nata reconstruction, reconstruction of Nata Ngwasha Gate section, Pandamatenge, construction of Mokhoritsani Khabani Mankhori Road, design, construction, and supervision of Mudipani Mabalani Road, design of Block 8, and Airport Junction interchanges, supervision and construction, Block 8 Junction, Palape Martins Drift, reconstruction, and so on. Funds will also cover road projects at design stage, such as access to CBD and those at pre-contract, such as the A1 Jualing Road and the Midiel and Tau Road. The budget will also cover new road infrastructure projects, such as mobile way bridge, establishment of a national road agency, Martins Drift Bridge reconstruction of Kokota, Tsabo, McCarthy Rust, and reconstruction of Dikabe Alerala under BTAP. The budget will also finance a range of built infrastructure projects, including refurbishment of Tonota College of Education, Mulepulle College of Education, Department of Building Maintenance area offices in Gaborone West, Department of Building Maintenance area offices Broadest, DRTS Ruwe office, and refurbishment of old supplies in Gaborone. In addition, part of the ministry's allocation will support the implementation of rail and aviation infrastructure, ICT projects, and Air Botswana finances projects. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Water and Human Settlement has been allocated the third largest share of the development budget, amounting to 3.62 billion pula, or 15.50% of the development budget. The ministry's budget allocation prioritizes ongoing projects and completion of major water supply and sanitation projects, including the North-South Carrier Pipeline, Mamashia, Water Treatment Plant, Pulepulle, Khamununyani, NSC Connection, Lobatse Water Supply Master Plan, Kanyes, and Kanye Sanitation. These projects are in their final stages and require settlement for final accounts to ensure their timely closure. The ministry also places emphasis on water and sanitation network projects such as the urgent refurbishment and expansion of the Mambo Wastewater Treatment Plant in Francistown, Maung Water and Sanitation Phase 2, together with new water supply pipeline projects, namely Kalahari North Water Supply, Mulepulle Water Supply and Distribution, which are critical for expanding access and improved service delivery across communities. Mr. Speaker, in addition, 702.96 million pula is earmarked for social housing projects, including the Bonno Turnkey Development Scheme, Bonno Home Improvement Scheme, and Bonno D4 and below public officers housing scheme. The fourth largest share of the proposed development budget of 2.86 billion pula, or 12.22%, has been allocated to the Ministry of Local Government and Traditional Affairs. This allocation will support the implementation of the social welfare programs, local government infrastructure, the development of primary education services, tribal administration infrastructure, development programs, and primary healthcare services. The social welfare programs accounting for 69.9% of the total ministry budget, such as Ikageng program, constituency community projects, destitute program, remote area development, and the BTEP Kwena empowerment program will also be catered for. To enhance efficiency and reduce duplication across intervention, there is an urgent need to accelerate the rollout of the single social registry, proxy means testing, as a targeting tool. The SSR project will be supported by the World Bank, which will undertake an assessment to identify bottlenecks, improve system performance, and enhance citizen experience. The local government infrastructure component, Mr. Speaker, will mainly cover projects such as the construction of the 9-kilometer road from Mopane to Block 8 in Gaborone, supported through a grant from the Chinese government. Other projects to be implemented include the maintenance of internal roads and construction of a bus terminal in Molepulle. The fifth largest share of development budget is allocated to the Ministry of State, President, Defense and Security, with an amount of 1.99 billion pula, or 8.55% of the total. The bulk of this allocation, that is 56.2%, is directed towards the country's security organs. The budget also provides 60 million pula for the establishment of rehabilitation centers at Maung and Lobatse under the Drug Enforcement Agency. The Ministry of Lands and Agriculture is proposed to be allocated the sixth largest budget allocation of 1.77 billion pula, representing 7.59% of the development budget. The budget is intended for projects and programs aimed at enhancing agricultural productivity, strengthening food security, and promoting sustainable farming practices that ensure long-term prosperity for Botswana. The bulk of the budget will mainly support the ongoing land management projects, such as the Mezimotlabe Block 4, Hanzi Expansion Block 1 to 7, Sesretsekgama International Airport SESA, as well as the Tluane Mankhodi Road, which was transferred from the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure. The budget will also provide for emerging national priorities and pronouncements, including cannabis production and regulatory framework. In addition, the budget also provides for the ministry's SOEs, including the Botswana Agricultural Marketing Board and the Botswana Vaccine Institute and the Botswana Meat Commission. Mr. Speaker, in addition, government continues to support the country's food security and agricultural export efforts through the livestock subsidy and the input subsidy programs. In light of increasing climatic shocks, priority is being placed on investing in agricultural value chains and advancing commercialization of both arable and livestock production. To this end, the adoption of modern farming technologies, development of agro-industries, and expansion of green energy solutions have become critical to enhancing the sector productivity. Mr. Speaker, as part of broader efforts to diversify the economy through agriculture, government is implementing a policy shift intended to enable regulated cultivation and use of industrial hemp and medicinal cannabis. This initiative will be implemented in phases, beginning with trials at the Botswana University of Agriculture and Natural Resources, and progressively expanding to Botswana farmers who demonstrate interest and capacity to participate in these emerging value chains. Mr. Speaker, the 4.05 billion pula, representing 17.32% of the development budget, is being allocated across the rest of the ministries. I didn't say others, I said the rest of the ministries and departments. This provision will cater for, among others, construction and refurbishment of education, health and other government facilities countrywide, investment in innovation and research and development, national retail payment switch, MIT Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program, as well as other projects. Mr. Speaker, let me talk about the overall budget and its financing. Mr. Speaker, the fiscal outlook for the financial year 2026-2027 anticipates an overall budget deficit of 26.35 billion pula, equivalent to 8.9% of GDP. The financing strategy for this deficit is expected to draw on a mix of domestic and external borrowing. However, external resource mobilization has become increasingly constrained, resulting in a greater reliance on domestic debt instruments and leaving significant financing gap. Total financing requirements are estimated at 22.3 billion pula, of which 18.6 billion pula remains unfinanced. Mr. Speaker, this reflects a structurally overstretched fiscal framework in which expenditure commitments persistently exceed available and realizable resources. Such misalignment is fiscally unsustainable in the long term, over the medium to long term, and underscores the urgent need for more credible, more disciplined, and more prudent fiscal planning. Failure to secure the required financing affordably, which failure will not happen, will inevitably lead to the accumulation of arrears, an adjustment mechanism deferment rather than a resolution of the underlying fiscal obligation. Either outcome would increase the public debt burden, raise debt service costs, and intensify pressures on our fiscus. Public service management. Public debt management. Mr. Speaker, during the 25-26 financial year, the budget was largely financed through domestic market. In this regard, as at December 2025, total public debt, including sovereign guarantees, amounted to 90.03 billion pula. This comprised 55.98 billion in domestic debt and 34.06 billion in external debt. Total debt as a proportion of GDP is estimated at 33.02%, with external funding at 12.49% and domestic having reached its threshold of 20% of GDP. The debt to GDP ratio is expected to reach 38.77% of GDP by March 2026. Mr. Speaker, with the GIA at critically low levels, debt levels are expected to increase significantly in order to finance the projected deficit. This additional financing would raise total public debt, including guarantees, to an estimated 44.66% of GDP by the end of 2026-2027 financial year, thereby requiring a recalibration of the statutory debt ceiling currently set at 40% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, while such an increase may generate short-term credibility concerns, these are outweighed by the significantly greater economic risks that would arise from a sharp fiscal consolidation needed to stay within the existing ceiling. In this context, a well-defined increase in statutory debt limit, anchored on a credible consolidation plan and supported by structural reforms, will be necessary to balance fiscal sustainability with economic growth. This approach, Mr. Speaker, would create sufficient space for a gradual and orderly fiscal adjustment while preserving the flexibility required to respond effectively to adverse shocks. Conclusion. Mr. Speaker, the 2026-27 budget is a statement of faith in Botswana and in the ability of her people to renew, to rebuild, and to rise. It recognizes our challenges honestly, it confronts our weaknesses directly, and yet affirms without hesitation that our best days are still within reach. Anchored in the 12th National Development Plan and the Botswana Economic Transformation Program, this budget signals a new chapter, one defined not by fear of scarcity, but by ushering in a new era of economic transformation and fiscal prudence. Mr. Speaker, the Right Honourable Speaker, this budget tells our people that the difficulties we face are not a verdict on our future, but a call to responsibility and resolve. Fiscal prudence is not austerity for its own sake. It is a deliberate choice to secure the basics that define dignity and stability in everyday life, such as schools that function, clinics that have medicines, and roads that are safe and maintained. At the same time, we refuse to allow the present constraints to trap us into stagnation. Even as we protect and restore these essentials, this budget is intentionally designed to be reform-driven and forward-looking, so that along fixing what we must fix and what must work, we actively transform our economy. We unlock new industries. We create jobs and build a more resilient and prosperous Botswana for the future. Mr. Speaker, allow me to speak plainly against corruption. Every pula stolen from the public purse is a clinic not built, it's a school left to decay, it's a road that becomes a grave, it's medicine that never reaches a patient. When resources meant to save lives are diverted for personal enrichment, the consequences are measured not only in lost opportunities, but in lost lives. Mr. Speaker, Botswana will not and must not be held hostage by corruption, greed, or indifference. Mr. Speaker, this government chooses accountability, it chooses integrity, and it chooses transparency. The reforms outlined in this budget strengthened oversight institutions, modernized procurement, tighter financial controls, and zero tolerance for the abuse are deliberate. To those entrusted with public office, public resources, and public trust, is demanded that you serve with honor, that we all serve with honor. Mr. Speaker, I would like to extend sincere appreciation to our development partners, bilateral and multilateral institutions, and private sector collaborators who continue to walk this journey with us. Your partnership strengthens our resolve, it complements our efforts and reinforces Botswana's standing as a credible, principled, and forward-looking nation. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to pay tribute to the men and women of the public service. Your work sustains the machinery of government, and it underpins the credibility of our reforms. The nation is grateful. Allow me, Mr. Speaker, to end with a poem, The Power of One, by Ashish Ram. One song can spark a moment, one flower can wake the dream, one tree can start a forest, one bird can herald a spring, one smile begins a friendship, one hand clap lifts a soul, one star can guide a ship at sea, one word can frame the goal, one vote can change a nation, one sunbeam lights a room, one candle wipes out darkness, one laugh will conquer gloom, one step must start each journey, one word must start each prayer, one hope will raise our spirit, one touch can show you care, one voice can speak with wisdom, one heart can know what's true, one life can make the difference. That is all this nation needs to turn around its fortunes. It needs each one of us, each one of you, to believe that you are special, that you can act, that your act, your work, your dream is enough to lift this nation. This nation will emerge from the troubled waters. We will rise as a people. We will build a nation in which every citizen, in every hamlet, in every valley, in every village, in every town, will have a fair chance, a fair opportunity to find and live a life that is empowering, a life that is fulfilling, a life that brings out the best in each one of us. This should be the solemn commitment of all of us, citizens, the people of Botswana, wherever you are. It is the commitment of this government, led by President Gideon Bok. It is certainly my solemn commitment. It is my promise that I will work tirelessly, I will work fairly, I will work tenaciously, and I will not rob this nation. I will not rob our people. of a single coin or a single note from the coffers of this nation. And I will be guided by the words or the word in James 3:17. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. Mr. Speaker, I now move that the appropriation 2026-2027 Bill 2026, Bill number 1 of 2026, be read a second time. I thank you.
Order, members. Order. Order, members. The question is that the appropriation 2026-2027, Bill 2026, Bill number 1 of 2026 be read a second time. Order, members. Order, members. In terms of Standing Order 86.2, the debate on the appropriation bill shall not commence until one clear day has elapsed, and thereafter not more than 10 further days shall be allotted for the second reading of the bill. And the debate on the second reading will therefore commence on Wednesday, the 11th, February 2026. And as it is the tradition in this House, the leader of opposition will be the first to respond if he so chooses. Honourable members, in line with Parliament going green, honourable members, you will not be finished with hard copies. But the few available hard copies will be available.
And of course, that brings to the end the official delivery of the budget speech by the Minister of Finance, Ndaba Nkosinathi, who's also the Vice President of the Republic of Botswana. Having said quite a mouthful across various sectors of development, commitments, promises, and of course the vision or the priorities towards a new Botswana, and of course the trajectory, the development trajectory that Botswana aspires to achieve, and of course given the level of funding and plow in which will obviously give impetus to the various priorities in question. Allow me to switch codes a bit, just to speak in the vernacular. Gongwe ke tlhalose jalo motsana weso gore e ne ile jaaka tona wa tsa madi Ndaba Nkosinathi a na a rola jalo pego ya ngwaga wa madi wa 2026-2027 ne a tlhalosa jalo go le gontsi tebang le gone gore tota tebelo pele go ya ko pele tamo le maitemisetso a le hatsheleno mo go thabologeng ga yone le gone gore tota madi a leng gore a segetse thoko go ya mo maphateng le mo phataneng ka go harologana e le yone the recurrent budget kgotsa e le yone madi a leng gore a dirisiwa tsatsi le letsatsi ga mmogo le yone the development budget e le yone madi a dithabollo ga o ka gakologelwa mo go tsa setsenga dibile go nnile le tse di malwa tse e leng gore gongwe a rebeletse yone the recurrent budget kgotsa e le yone madi a leng gore a segetse thoko mo madi a tsatsi le letsatsi a leng gore a segetse thoko mo kabong ya madi re ne ra bona gone gore Ministry, well, Child Welfare and Basic Education, the third largest share, the second largest share, local government, state, state president, the lion's share. Local government, the second largest share ke gone gore bontlhabongwe jwa seo ke gore re ne ra lemoga jalo gone gore go nna ga nna le tshutiso mo dingwageng tse di sa tswang go heta ra itse gone gore ditleliniki ka go harologana di ne di isiwa gone ko lephateng lone le la local government di tswa segolobogolo gone mo mogameng one wa botsogo e leng gore re ka re o na le yone that heavy portfolio mme mo nakong ya gompieno re bona e le gore madi ona e leng gore a tsene gone mo local government a ta thusa go itebaganya le maitamo magolo a yone primary health care e le gore re na ra utlwa mothusa tautona rather a bua ka yone e na re kgante jana hale re simolola pele ga re simolola yone pego yone re ne ra kgona go buisana le ene tona wa lephata lone la botsogo mme re ne ra utlwa ka ditshologetso tse e leng gore le ene gongwe na e leditse gore go ka nna jang ke dumela jalo gore gongwe re ta kgona go nna le sebaka hopefully go bua le ene re te rute gore o dumela gore e be go ntse jang ya ka lephata lone la gagwe la health le hilwe the fourth largest share of the recurrent budget mme mo gontsi mo e leng gore go ka buega ke ratile thata magoko ga mothusa tautona Ndaba Nkosinathi ha bua ka kgang ya corruption a bua gone gore maitamo magolo a boeteledipele jo e leng gore bo tshwere puso mo nakong ya gompieno ke go netefatsa gone gore tshenyetso setšhaba e nna sengwe se e leng gore se kgapelwa gante gotlhelele a lebeletse gone gore tota ga re lebeletse tse e leng gore di amiwa thata ke yone kgang ya corruption ke yone ditleliniki dikolo ditsela hela jalo ke dilo tse e leng gore ga go na leng corruption teng dilo tse ga di kgone go atologa kgotsa di thabololwa ka nngwe tsela gongwe ke emise go le kahenyana se ne le gore ne ke eleditse go se bua mo nakong ya gompieno re bue jalo le matona le mapalamente ba e leng gore ba tswa gone ka rute gone gore bone ba itebagantse go le kahe ba ikutlwa jang the Minister of Child Welfare and Basic Education e hilwe jalo jaaka se tsa go tlhalosa the third largest share tona mo nakong ya gompieno re itse gone gore your ministry e hilwe over 11 billion more the recurrent budget. What are your key takeaways and what are your sentiments about that, and of course re lebeletse the critical priorities within your ministry?
Ke a leboga ke itumetse thata gompieno ka gore be budget e tsholetsegile yana ke gona gore go recognize-tswe gore go na le the child welfare component kana mo budgeteng e fetileng e ne e le gore ga ba tsengwa ko go rona mme yaanong e gorogile mme gape le yona budget e tla re thusa thata ya ka gompieno re na le yona di-programe tsa bo bulabuka go na le kgang ya refurbishment and expansion of schools go na le yona early childhood development and education very very critical re revampile our curriculum ya STEAM ya goroga le yona e tlhokana le gore be go na le madi digitalization le yona e mo tseleng e tlhokana le madi le ha ebile go ka tswa go sa lekane thata mme ke tsaya gore re tla be re adile moalo re bo re neela Batswana sone se e leng gore re ikanetse go se ba direla to how transform the education system o build skills and development human capital ya ka mo STEAM le gore yaanong re tla be re redirecta re sa tlhole re le theory based hela kana subject based hela ele ya bogologolo e le gore yaanong re na le bo multiple certification bana vocational skills le tsona di imbued within it. Now I'm very excited ke excited ka gore le ha re lemoga ha re lente mo bokueng le ene minister wa finance the vice president o supa gona gore tota in the long term whatever we are doing now it will benefit bana ba rona nna ke lebogile thata.
Tona go le gantsi ha re bua ka di-budget kgotsa kgaoganyo ya madi Batswana gongwe ko lapeng gantsi re na le go lebelela one madi a mantsintsi ya gongwe re sa akanye gore tota an ordinary Motswana ene o ka sologela gore o benefita go le kae kgotsa ene seabe sa gagwe keng segolobogolo gongwe ka bokhutshwane re ba tlhalosetse ko lapeng gore tota mme ene Motswana ko lapeng ene o sologela molemo go le kae ke diphetogo tsonetse
makeriana kana ke re ga education system e tlhanola e fetola go tokafadiwa go raya gore tota batsadi le bona go isa bana dikolong go na le boleng mme gape kana yaka ke go le child welfare mo teng component go na le bo school feeding programs tse e leng gore di home grown yaanong di-project tsona tsa mohuta o kana gape project nngwe le nngwe e tshwanetse gore e supe gore impact ya yona not only mo goreng ko sekolong tota hela mo Batswaneng in terms of job creation go raya eng
gongwe ga re wetsa pisano ya rona kgang ya bula buka ke ratile hela thata ke dumele jalo gore le Batswana ko lapeng gongwe la ba ise ba e tlhaloganye ka bokete e botlhokwa go le kae and what does it really mean in the long run, the short and long term?
tota hela kgang e tona ke go ntsha bana ba banyenyane ba ba ma form 3 ba ba feitseng kana ba ba sa dirang sentle mo mekgwatheng mme ga re ba ntshe hela re tshwantse gore kana BETP e tlile ka mo go teng True North mo go sha mo e leng gore inclusivity mo teng skills development e mo teng multiple pathways e mo teng ke mo e leng gore o tlo go tsaya ngwana o mo profiler wa identify kwa leng strong teng o bo mo sala morago gone go vocationally gore a kgone go ithuta mme bile a ka re tla be re tsamaya anong re buisanya le tsona di institutions tse e leng gore di na le di-programe tse di bogadi bo gaufi gore bana ba kgona gore ka moso le bona ba bo ba setse ba ithutile mme le bona a ka ntse re expanda dikolo yana ke bona ba e leng gore re tsaya gore together with bana ba bangwe ba di-TVET e ka re ka moso e be le bona yaanong ba ba boelang gape ba bereka gore bana ba seka ba helela hela mo mekgwatheng ga ba batla gore ba tswelele ka TVET tla be re ba leyetse a strong foundation gore ba kgone go tswelela ke a leboga
Tona ke lebogile thata
mma ke go lebogile nna Batswana ba dumele
Thank you. Ene le tona wa lone lephata la Child Welfare and Basic Education. Ile gona gore tota lephata la gagwe mo nakong ya gompieno le hilwe yalo the third largest share of the budget which goes into over 11 billion pula. Me go ra go le gontsi for lephata la gagwe jaaka se tswa go tlhalosa dikgang tse leng gore gongwe di sologetswe jalo gore di ta kgona go atologa di ta kgona go thabollwa go nna le seabe se se tseneletseng ha re bella ko yone kgang ya human resource development ile gone to grow the human capital ya lehatshe leno re itse gone gore tota e ra go le gontsi mo gone go ka bakanyeng itshulelo le gone go godiseng itshulelo ka kakaretso mme go gontsi mo e leng gore ka go bua ke dumela jalo gore tana ntse re bua le matona kgotsa mapalamente ka go harologana le bone re utlwa gone gore segolo bogolo bone ba itsetse go le kae ba ratile go le kae dikagelo tsa bone tebang le yone kgaoganyo ya madi e sa tswang go ntshiwa kgotsa e sa tswa go rolwa ke tona ene wa tsa madi kgotsa re Ndaba Nkosinathi gore go ra go le gontsi go le kae o ka go gola gape gore ene tona ha ntse a bua jalo o buile thata le ona maitamo a gagwe and I quote verbatim he talked about gore he will tirelessly work and he will not rob this nation of a single coin or a single note me go tlhalosa one maitamo a ileng gore ile the finance minister o itamile go le kae go netefatsa gona gore madi a dirisiwa ka mokgwa o thomameng le gore a sologela molemo maphata ka go harologana le Batswana ka kakaretso mo nakong ya gompieno a re kgabaganyetse kwa modirikana re baone le ene a go hetse le gore go ditshuletse mo sebakeng sa gompieno
jaaka ne tshedi ya go bolelela gore ka go harologana matona a neetswe bokae go tla go lebagana le di-ministry tsa bone go berekela lehatshe la Botswana go a pele nna tla ke go bolelela gore ke go bolelela ke go gakolola le gore go ya pele goromente a re wa go dira eng tse e leng gore madi ao a tla ba go lebagana le tsone go bona gore tse dingwe tlabele dio tsa gore madi a tsena ya mo goromente jaaka o itse gore itshulelo wa Botswana ntse e wetse kwa tlase go tla be go nna le gore ke go bolelela gore ene tona a re ba tsile go netefatsa gore ba hokotsa jang madi ao a tlatswe ka paka tsa menwana a latlhagela lehatshe kana latlhagela setšhaba sa Botswana mme ke tla go bolela gape le gore tshologelo ya go ka dira ditiro e ga ka yone ke tla go bolela gape le gore go a pele tseo mo go tse di amang wena Motswana o le ko gae tsa botshelo jwa gago bogolo jang ba ba leng gore ga ba kgone go itirela sepe gormente a re o irile mme ke nagano le re Musi gore a tle gore thusa gore ene o e lebile jang o utlwile go teng se se mo kgatileng thata ke mo parlamenteng mo se ne se begwa ke tona re Ndaba Nkosinathi re Musi ke a go amogela a re lebegela gone gana gore ke simolola pele ka gore seo se kgatlhegetseng thata ke eng gone ana se se kang gore go ga go ka nna le tsela e leng gore e tla tla go nametsa Batswana.
Maintenance thata wa dikwele ditleliniki le ditsela na mo kgaolong e ke emetseng ya Gabane Mampoti tota ga gona sekolo sepe se e leng gore a mo tleliniki e nkareng da in a good standing position tsotlhe hela ke tse e leng gore tota di batla go di baakangwe mme seo se ke se e leng gore le nna ke ne ntse ke se eletsa ntse ke sa akanya gore e ka re gompieno ka re ga puso e letla le ga nne go sena di-development projects mme ba itebaganya thata gore ba busetse di-building tse di setseng di le teng mo serodumong se se siameng gore at least batho ba kgone gore ba di dirise sentle le tsone dikolo thata go bana jang ne ke lebeletse yalo so mo ke a go itumelela
mo gongwe gape gone o ne a bua ka gone gore mme ebile mo go baakanyeng dikago tsa puso ba tla netefatsa gore ba tsholetsa o batla ba re ke yone TVET graduates gore ke gone ga bang go tsenya letso go teng hana ga ke itse gore ga o e leba yo le one e golagana yang le maikaelo magolo hela ka bophara a puso a go tsholetsa yone karolo e ya thuto.
Ke karolo e siameng thata ke karolo e ntle mme ke dumela gore puso tshwanetse gape re ne re na practical gape gore ga nka re emela gore re tsise bana ba ba ithutang botoka nna I believe that they should look for local contractors mo dikgaolong to start doing that re se ka ra itlhaganela thata gore tlabe re lebeletse bana ba rona ba thibete hela ka gore tota standards or the conditions are very poor ga go batlere ka diega le go batlela gore ena madi a ntšhia yana ka bogego e beile le gompieno tota go tshwatsa ka go simolola go baakanyediwa gore go tendarwe gore go dirwe kana bana le madi a dikolo a le mo tlase yana ke gone gore tota di-classroom di-desk ditilo ga gona sepe
ke dumela gore le wena o etse tlhoko ga nna a bua ka ke harologanya ke re go na le gore yanong madi a tsene puso e tshwanetse gore madi a tsene ke no ke utlwa a bua ka gore ba bonetse maraka citrus products tse le tlebe di tswa kwana ba o bonetse ko Asia ba o bonetse ko Europe o ne a bua gape mo go ka tsenyang madi na a bua ka BVI gore go a pele tshwanetse go dire melemo e leng gore e ka nna karolo ya tseo tse di rekisiwang ke puso go tsenyetsa lehatshe madi mme ke utlwa gape a bua ka nadi gore tshwanetse gore ano isimolole go dira dipeo tse e leng gore di ka lebagana le Botswana gore a fokotse madi a dirisang go reka dipeo ga ke itse gore eo mokgwa dikgaba go lekana ka ene
no malana le ena gore tota o bona kgang e ya melemo a BVI bona gompieno foot and mouth e re tsentse ka gale ka ke Botswana ke mahatsha a mabapi nna ke dumela gore gone ga nne re setse re itlhaganetse gore re dire melemo ka bogego mo legatsheng la Botswana e ka setse re na le mmaraka o bonalang citrus fruits tsone dinamune la ka o bone kopikwe project e sa le tswa kgakala ke dumela gore e na le mogadikana 3 or 4 e ne na le dikgwetlho tsa yone mme nna ke a itumela gompieno gore ba re ba se ba bone mmaraka ke dilo tse ke dumela gore di ka thusa le go hira Batswana because they will also create jobs ga nna go tsenya madi a la through export batho Batswana ba tla bereka if you recall yone the citrus project kana thata ne ke tira batswakwa because ke bone ne go te bana le skill
Ee.
ke dumela gore le batswana ba tla simolola gore ba tsene mo tirong.
re ntse re le mo gone ya go tsenya madi le go hira batho ke ne ke utlwa ba bua gore go a go nna le a re ke yone Botswana mercantile exchange a re go a go nna le mo gongwe gape mo bangwe le bagana le gone ga go tsenya madi mo ka gale hela mo lehatsheng ka bophara puso e beile mo gone ke lekgetho o na bua gore jaanong ba go tsholetsa ditlhako mo go netefatseng gore lekgetho le a duelwa ga gona opo e leng gore o tlolwa ke go duela lekgetho a tshwanetse go bokete go le kana ka eng jaaka o kile wa tsena mo pusong gore o netefatse gore lekgetho tota ga gona o le tilang
Kana lekgetho lone le tshwanetse gore le duelwe especially le e leng gore o motho wa bo le mo tirong le ga e le gore o dile kontraka nngwe gore o bereke goko nna tsoe ke dumela gore immediately before o duelwa o tshwanetse gore di be di ka make sure gore di a cut-iwa mpo di a deductiwa gore madi puso e bone madi puso e tlhoka madi jaaka o bona gompieno kana re ne le ha re le o gola ke gola ne re itse gore budgete ditaemane ke tsone the biggest earner of revenue mme gompieno ana re bona e le number 4 ha ke sa hose go a ko tlase.
okay
Ee.
re tlogela gone gana re tlogelela gore o ntshitse kgakololo ya gago mme re tla bona gore go a pele ka lwa boraro ga lo simolola lo tla bo lo e tshwatlha go le kana ka eno le maparamente
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Re ba ke a go leboga mme mo nakong ya gompieno re nagano le tona wa lephata la trade and entrepreneurship o ka gakogela jalo gone gore ga re bua ka yone the recurrent budget lephata la gagwe le hilwe jalo the 8th largest share of the budget gongwe re utlwa ka ene gone gore tota his sentiments king mabapi le yone phetogo eno tona ke a go amogela mo sebakeng sa gompieno gongwe re utlwe maikutlo a lona ka sebaka mo sebakeng sa gone ana gore tota ka lephata la gago le hilwe jalo the 8th largest share of the recurrent budget. What are your sentiments? Maikaelelo ke eng, maikemisetso ke eng segolobogolo?
No, thank you so much for the opportunity. Re itumetse thata. Ga nke go lekana go itumela, but I think as you know from NDP 12 and BETP, we've been given to start a foundation of diversifying the economy. So it was important that we get something to create that foundation, especially for manufacturing, and also give some to small and medium enterprises. We know so there is need for that platform for companies to create jobs, and also key to it on a foundation manufacturing. And what I'm also happy about is that the minister mentioned support from government, especially market access to small and medium enterprises, which is the foundation of every economy. Government is the largest buyer, so if government buys from small and medium enterprises, that's how we're going to create growth, and that's how we're going to create jobs.
For an ordinary Botswana, what does this really translate to in terms of them really understanding how this budget now, the breakdown of this budget, also translates to everyday their welfare issues, development issues? How should they understand this budget and what it means for them?
Well, the space is getting tighter every day, and that's what we should understand, is that we're shrinking. We have a small economy, therefore we must maximize whatever table we have. So it's important that everyone understand that we have a problem with our diamonds not selling, therefore we have to come up with other means to fund government programs, and therefore labor at family level, because there isn't much money in the market for those suffer, and then they have to also be prudent in the usage of money.
And maybe just to end it, the minister also mentioned the AFCFTA instrument and how critical it is also in terms of the priority areas. What are your sentiments regarding that?
No, it's important that we go out and look for other markets. We have been focusing on the European markets for a long time for our beef, and it's important that we explore markets, especially that are closer to us, which will be cheaper, unlike the EU. We know it's very expensive to keep up with the European markets, and the ones that are closer to us we have not yet explored, and we really have to do it with other commodities also, because we have not explored much really. What we've been doing is digging and then setting out raw materials, so we also have to start manufacturing or adding value to everything that comes out of here, and also go to Africa to sell those products.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you so much.
And of course, that was the Trade and Entrepreneurship Minister, bringing us to the end of this conversation. But just to end on this one, it was a point mentioned by the Minister of Finance that he would want that the nation be given a fair chance and opportunity to lead a fulfilling and empowered life. And of course, this speaks to the budget that he delivered this afternoon. And of course, I am Utsidile Onkabetse signing out from this end and handing over to Rebaune.
hela jalo ra tswella motswana e gore re ne re lebelle gore ba ile ba jama parlamente ka ha e beileng ka teng re Gaolatlhe Ndaba e leng one kabakanyo ya madi a lehatshele a taba e le one go beilwe mo go one mo ngwageng ya 2026 go tsana le 2027 me yana ke na le re dumelang sa leshando yo e leng moeteledipele wa party ya Botswana Congress Party mme ebile le ene moeteledipele wa di-party tsa kganetso mo parlamenteng re sa leshando tla ke go amogele re tle re utlwe gore o re be le wena ka ga o e lebileng ka teng ka gale gore o e beile Ndaba budget o e beile ka ga le gore kgonne ka teng ba bangwe ba e bona ka ga ba e bonang ka teng mme mmang ke gone gore re utlwe gore ko go wena ga o mo reeditse ebile o e tshwantshang le tse di hitileng ebile o e lebela le ko pele gore o e ba mo seemo se sentseng ya sa itsholelo o e lebile jang ka gore ke bona ha buang ka di-project tse le gore di ya go tsenya madi ke ne ke bua ka BVI gore e tshwanetse gore e tle go bereka e tsenye madi e nne le seabe mo diong tse le gore di romelwa ko ntle dithoto o na bua gore ba itumelela gore ba bonetse maraka the citrus plants products ko mahating a tshwanang a Asia le ko Europe mme ne ke re ke go he sebaka sa gore o mokgwedi kgaba re utlwe gore se o se tsereng e le mmang sa go ha Batswana le sedi kana tsholohelo ya gore seemo se re mo go sone se ka tokagala ga go dirisiwa budget e sentle ke
go motho o ka re pheletsong ya dio tsotlhe tse di buileng a molaetsa ke gore seemo se tokagetse mo ngwageng wa 2026 go na le yakane re le ha ka ngwaga wa 2029 a re yanong re le bale ka 2029 re rapelele 2036 gore ke gone go ka bonalang ditiro tse ne ba di buile mo maitlamong a bona se se itumedisang ke gore a ba supa gore ga go sa tlhole go na le go mono go twe budget supplementaries ka kopo madi a tlaleletso mme ra itse go hirwa ke gore gone ga gona one madi se sa itumediseng ke gore e re le mo dipharagobeng tsonetse puso e ga e lebege e tsaya ditshwetso tsa go leka go sireletsa madi gore a se ka a tsena ko e leng gore ga se gone ko Batswana ba tlhokang go thusiwa teng ka madi wasteful expenditure go se dirisa madi ka tsela e leng gore ka moso go tswa gore pateletsa go tsaya dikoloto mme re sa di tsele go aga dio tse di ka irang bokamoso jo bo leng botoka ke sone he ke tsang gore gongwe ga na a dirile botoka mo go tsone mme se pele e kana ya matona ya le gompieno le ke ha se ka ba bangwe gore mo bikeng tse pedi tse tharo tse di hitileng re amogetse matona a le mararo ko maung ba ta ka dihohane ba ta ba rwele ba direla puso botlhe ba tsile go bua ka selo se le sengwe hela gore ba batla go nna le constitutional court ga go tswa re mo hosa re mo pega mo sehaneng re amogela re ra maotwana wa go loga ga go tswa re ra maotwana re amogela re sala kae botlhe ba tsile go bua ka selo se le sengwe hela ba gore ga bana nako ya ditshenyegelo
yaanong mo go tse e leng gore o lebagane le tsene ke dinankola tse tsa bo gore mme tshologelo ke gore ga re beile pele Motswana maitlamo a tshwana le gore banadi ba simole a re bua ka bana ba leng gore ke balemi gore re tle go lo tlhogaletsa bokete jwa go reka dipeo re tle go tlhogaletsa sepatšhe sa lehatshe la Botswana go reka dipeo ka madi a mantsi go tswa ko ntle a go ka le re pharologanyo nngwe mo botshelong kana mo maitekong a go tokagatsa itsholo la Botswana bogolo jang ka go itsetsepela ka tse di tiretsweng kwana
se re tshwanetseng go se dira re le puso ke go ira gore Motswana ga a le ko lapeng a re editse budget yone a kgone go supa go gongwe gore nna ke ka tsena ga kae ke le Motswana ke ka tsena ga kae go ira botshelo jo botoka o buile ka go dirisa madi a tshwanang le bo constituency development program CCP gore go tshwaragane le dikgang tsa bo ipelegeng kana yaanong ka hetotsweng ka teng go tshwaragane le bo agriculture ga o mo reeditse o ka dumela gore go ha go nna le phetogo nna ke a itse gore ka ba CCP le ngwaga o hitileng o buile yana mme re tsena mo go February ngwaga wa hela ga isa ntse madi a na bega a CCP a ngwaga o hitileng ngwaga o hitileng o buile ka gore A1 e tla nna dual carriageway dikoloi di le pedi di tsamaya di lebile kwa tse dingwe ditako e builwe ga gona go pea go simolotsweng teng ke ne ke le mo A1 maabane ga go bona mahoko a mantle mme ga gona sepe se se tswang se lebega se tsamalana le sa se buang
se o heletsang ka sone ke sone se gore mahoko a mantle le tsa di bang pele di lebega di le dintle mathata e ka nna mo goreng ga di diragadiwe a re tlogele gone gana re kgaosetse gone ga re salešhamto mme ke tsaya gore ba go utlwile Batswana gore go diragatsa kana go ba gapele se sang go dirwa go hetola matshelo a Batswana ke gone gore se sa le morago ka go diragatsa jaanong. Thank you ke lebogile thata. re tsile go itlogela gone gana ebile re ineela ba bangwe ba re berekang le bone gore ba tsweledise se ba se boneng se ba se itemogetseng le se e leng gore ba se bone ba sa amuile mo budgeteng yana gore a gona le pharologanyo e tla nnang teng bogolo jang mo go direng ditiro bogolo jang mo go gokotseng madi a tswang ka diphatlha tsa menwana mo pusong jaaka ekile ene go tle go bue gore a mantsinyana a le gore go tshwanetse gore go lebane le one a go tle go kabiwa tsone diphatlha tseo tsa menwana mme gape a le bone Batswana ba bone pharologanyo ya budget e tshwana le yone ke ne go tloa bua ka gore minister a bua ka gore unbundling ya BPC gore tle go bona gore a gona le pharologanyo e tla nna teng ke ne go tloa bua ka diporo gore di tshwanetse gore tle go nna le mo go tle go te ke yone triple P e tle go diragatswa ka triple P arrangement se se setseng ke gore wena Motswana o tsile go nna le seabe se se kae go netefatsa gore se se beilweng pele bonyenyane jo bo beilweng pele bo tsile go nna bo re solegela molemo mme o na le seabe mo go jone a re tlogele gone ga Motswana etsho o tla tswela dithulaganyo tsa Botswana television na ke re bona o dirile